Everybody Loves Raymond is a great sitcom that had many hilarious episodes, but its worst reviewed episode on IMDb points out the series' biggest problem. When Everybody Loves Raymond ended after 9 seasons, it was one of the top-rated shows on television, and in the years since, it has endured as a beloved classic. But it's not all roses. Although Everybody Loves Raymond's greatest episodes demonstrate the series at its absolute best, the show wasn't perfect. While shows like Bob's Burgers, Kim's Convenience, Friday Night Lights, and The Dick Van Dyke Show have depicted a happy, healthy, loving marriage, Everybody Loves Raymond portrays marriage at its most toxic and contentious, and it's not always fun to watch. While the top-rated episode has a near-perfect 9/10, Everybody Loves Raymond has a lot of episodes with mediocre ratings on IMDb. Season 1, Episode 11, Captain Nemo, in which Ray and Robert get into a basketball feud, and Season 3, Episode 8, The Article, in which Ray is jealous of his friend's success, have both garnered a subpar 6.9 rating. The lowest-rated episode of Everybody Loves Raymond highlights the biggest problem with the show, and the main reason why it hasn't aged gracefully in the 2 decades since it went off the air. There are some harsh realities of rewatching Everybody Loves Raymond, and Ray and Deborah's ridiculously unhealthy marriage is the biggest one. The worst-rated Everybody Loves Raymond episode is The Children's Book. Season 2, Episode 8 is IMDb users' least favorite episode. The lowest-rated Everybody Loves Raymond episode on IMDb is Season 2, Episode 8, The Children's Book. This episode starts out with Ray and Deborah on the same page, no pun intended, but it quickly leads to a bitter falling out. It kicks off with Deborah complaining to Ray about reading the same old bedtime stories to the kids. This gives Deborah the idea to write a children's book of her own. She plans to base the story on her own experiences as a parent and her knowledge of what kids like, and she asks for Ray's help because he's a professional writer. Ray is initially reluctant to help, but gets talked into it, and they get to work as soon as they put pen to paper. They turn out to have massive creative differences. They agree that the story should be about a kid running away from home, but they disagree on what kind of animal the main character should be, how the story should progress, and what the ultimate message should be. Ray and Deborah start out collaborating with each other, but they end up competing with each other. They each write their own version of the story and force Ally to decide which one is best. By the end, it's just uncomfortable to watch, especially when they get Ally involved and force her to choose a winner. The Children's Book shows Ray and Deborah's adversarial marriage at its worst. Ray and Deborah's bickering is the most uncomfortable part of Everybody Loves Raymond. Deborah talking to Ray in Everybody Loves Raymond. The worst part of Everybody Loves Raymond is Ray and Deborah's adversarial marriage. The show often makes you wonder why they even got married in the first place, because they don't seem to even like each other, let alone love each other, and Ray is a terrible husband. It's uncomfortable to watch them yelling and screaming at each other. Many aspects of Everybody Loves Raymond have aged well. Everyone can still see their own parents or grandparents in Frank and Marie, while Robert's arc is hilarious and heartwarming in equal measure. But the show is at its worst when Ray and Deborah devolve into a bitter argument that makes you think they should just get a divorce. The Children's Book epitomizes what makes Ray and Deborah's relationship the worst part of the show. They don't support each other, they do the complete opposite and try to one-up each other. The episode starts with Deborah asking for Ray's help, and it ends with Ray desperately trying to outdo Deborah in the eyes of their young, impressionable daughter. Ray and Deborah's constant fighting is very uncomfortable when the kids are involved. It's shown to have a negative impact on the kids. Michael presents the angry family in Everybody Loves Raymond. What makes The Children's Book the worst episode of Everybody Loves Raymond is that it involves Ally in Ray and Deborah's heated argument. They each write their own children's story, then read them to Ally and force her to choose which one is better. It's bad enough when Ray and Deborah are fighting, but it's even worse when they involve the kids. Throughout the series, Ray and Deborah's constant bickering and mutual resentment is shown to have a negative impact on the kids. In the Season 6 premiere, Michael wrote a story called The Angry Family, about his own angry parents and grandparents. His story ends with the heartbreaking line, "The grown-ups were always very loud." It hurt the kids' ears. All the fighting and arguing between Ray and Deborah created a hostile, dysfunctional environment for these kids to grow up in. Just yelling at each other within earshot of the kids would be more than enough to have a negative impact, but in Everybody Loves Raymond's worst-rated episode, Ray and Deborah directly involve their daughter in the conflict.